Hello, everyone. Sorry about yesterday. I forgot last week that it was a holiday yesterday, and I forgot that also I wouldn't be here, which made it pretty hard to actually do the reading. I was my daughter when she came home from Pittsburgh um, left some of her things in Pittsburgh. So we flew back. The house she stayed in was open for just a couple of days. So we had to get in there and pack all our stuff, 4 big bags, and get it back. So we had an exciting couple days traveling for the first time since the shutdown. We flew Southwest Airlines. So everyone's required to wear a mask right now. So all travelers, as well as all staff of the airline, at least on Southwest. All the airports we went to had mask requirements. A lot of the restaurants and things aren't open. The airline served a can of water and one small snack, regardless of length of flight. Make sure they were minimizing their contact with everybody. So it felt pretty safe. And there was also like no one there. In fact, one of the airports we went to really felt empty, like at the Portland airport, in one branch of it, it was like 4 of us. There were a lot more on the other side, but yeah, it was strange. It was different. The overall experience, though, I felt like people were working hard and being careful to try and keep social distancing things in place, which I felt good about. Do not love wearing a mask for 10 hours straight. That was not pleasant. Okay, people are starting to say hello. The Scales family is here. Hi, so excited to hear the next chapter. Smiley face, other smiley face, wave. We missed your reading yesterday from Neil. Neil, I'm so sorry. And my daughter actually asked me, I think on Saturday, she's like, are you reading on Monday while we're traveling? And I was like, oh no, what have I done? Yeah. And this next chapter, I left you guys on kind of a cliffhanger too. So a 3-day cliffhanger. Sorry about that. Caitlin, hello. How was your weekend? Well, like I said, I was traveling. Oh, you know what I didn't tell you? We picked up a rental car. And we got in, it was like almost midnight when we got our rental car, get into the rental car. And I was like, it kind of smells like pot. And I asked the guy there, does this rental car smell like pot to you? And the rental car guy stuck his head in. He goes, I think you're smelling the stuff that we spray in there after we clean. I was like, okay. And I've been wearing a mask all day, so who knows? So we drive to the hotel, park the car. Next morning, go and just open the door of the car. And it was like someone had freshly smoked in there. It was so bad. So we called it the pot car. We drove that thing around, and rental car place was great. They actually ended up giving us a 50% discount, which was nice. Lily Me says hello. Hello. Have you finished rewatching all of Avatar? I wonder. I watched half of the first episode, so I'm on the trail. The Sims family says hello from the Sims. Hello, Sims. So good to see you. Yeah. So before we get started, because apparently I've been missing out on things like giving announcements, let me just let you know who our guest is this week, which I don't think I had told you because I just set it up. It's Lindsay Franklin. Lindsay is the author of the Weaver trilogy, the third of which just came out. It's called The Story Hunter. I don't know if you're familiar with Lindsay, but she's a delightful person. The Weaver trilogy is about these storytellers that can take stories and cause them to crystallize into sort of like statues. And they're worth a lot of money. It's about this poor weaver. That's what they're called, these storytellers. This poor weaver who ends up crossing paths with royalty, basically, and all sorts of drama ensues for 3 books. Anyway, she's coming to be with us on Friday at 1 o'clock West Coast, and 4 o'clock Eastern. Lily Me says, oh gosh, this chapter, covering her eyes, crying. I was screaming about it to my internet friends when I first read it. It is I'm proud of this chapter. It's a good one. We'll have to take a look here. And of course, she also says, yes, Avatar, exclamation, exclamation. Okay, well, let's jump in. That's more than enough winding up here. So as you know, the story so far, Madeline Oliver can't breathe. except through the magic of the Sunlit Lands, particularly from the Elenil. These magical beings from the Sunlit Lands. She's invited by someone named Hanali to come to the Sunlit Lands and work for 1 year in the service of the Elenil. And at the end of a year, 1 human year, her breath will be completely returned to her. She'll be healed completely. She arrives in the Sunlit Lands with her friend Jason, and through a series of events, these evil bad guys she's meant to be fighting, the Skim, are trying to capture them. She's discovered that magic is kind of a messy thing. Jason was hurt, almost killed at one point, and she used magic to heal him by taking the health of a Skim warrior and giving it to Jason, which she didn't tell Jason about, but he's basically figured it out. He's not super happy about it because he feels like someone died so he could live. And then they were chased to the castle they were staying in, which is called Westwind, and they were split up there carrying these artifacts that are Skim artifacts. The Skim are trying to get them back. The Elenil are trying to prevent that. So Jason has ended up in the desert with a Cockry woman named Bailea, and Madeline was escaping with her roommate Shula when her bird she was on the magic failed, and they fell into the river, and she was pulled out of the river by one of the most dreaded of the Skim warriors, the Black Skull. Only she had a shocking discovery that the Black Skull was actually someone she knew, someone she was close to, her ex-boyfriend Darius, who has been working for the Skim all along. And she's horrified how he could be working for these evil monsters instead of for the beautiful Elenil. And he has promised her that he's now going to explain exactly why he's doing what he's doing. And that's this chapter that we're about to step into. So Tim says, hey, Tim, welcome back. Good to see you again. Patrick says, good afternoon, Matt. Hello, Patrick. Good to see you. Dr. Awesome says, glad the flights and airports weren't too bad. I'm nervous about flying this summer, but more nervous about Constellations. Womp womp. Yeah, I get that. I was a little nervous about that myself, especially because it's like the old days. Southwest was flying planes maybe 3/4 full or 2/3 full, so that there wouldn't be anyone in the middle seats. And one of our flights was maybe a quarter full, which, yeah, 20 years ago, that was more normal, but it felt weird now. Tim says, haven't seen you a while since Big Break. Yeah, it's been a long time. And Big Break doesn't even happen anymore, which is crazy. So, yeah, good to see you, Tim. Okay, let's dive in. Here we go. Chapter 31, The Wasted Lands. Do not cry in the darkness, but follow the small, bright star, from a traditional Skim lullaby. They flew for a while in sunlight. Madeline loved the blue sky studded with white clouds. She even saw off to the west the sparkling expanse of the sea, the Ginian Sea, according to Darius, the home of the Johnny and the shark people. As they continued southward, she saw an impossibly large forest with trees as high as thin mountains. She asked Darius about it, but he pointed instead toward the southeast. The Wasted Lands, he said in his harsh skull voice. It rose up like an angry dark cloud or a tidal wave. Somehow the sunlight didn't penetrate the column of darkness that towered over that place. Campfires and torches dotted the distant landscape. The owl descended in lazy, looping arcs as they fell toward the northern edge of the blackness. They landed in a strange twilight, where bright daylight shone at their backs and full night stood before them. Darius slid off the owl. He offered Madeline his gloved hand, a motion both familiar, coming from Darius, and foreign, coming from a black skull. She took his hand and slipped down. We'll walk a short distance into the darkness, Darius said. Can you take that helmet off? I'd rather be with Darius than with a black skull. The horned head tilted for a moment before Darius reached up and removed the helmet. Of course, he said, and took off his gloves too. You don't have to cover up now, Darius said. Only the Elenil require no skin to show. She pulled her gloves off. Why did you cover up then? For the sake of the Elenil? Darius grinned. Skim magic might have protected me from wounds as a black skull, but I couldn't get over the idea that I would lose the magic and be standing around with bare arms and no gloves. I wanted protection. Skim magic? Darius nodded. It's the same as Elenil magic, really? If I'm wounded in battle, a skim takes the wound. A team of skims stay back for each black skull, and healers work to try to save as many of them as they can. It's a new technique and one of the few that has given us an upper hand against those monsters. He saw the look on her face, raised his hands, and said, against the Elenil. But why have humans been the skulls? Why not others skim? And how is that different than the way the Elenil are using the skim? It's different because the skim are in control. He looked her in the eyes, and it's humans because the skim insisted that I be the first black skull because the whole thing was my idea. Madeline, stunned, started to ask him another question, but he shook his head. We should start moving. He led her into the darkness. After a few minutes, he reached out and took her hand. It felt natural, but she couldn't stop herself from thinking about him being a black skull, kidnapping Shula, almost killing Jason, or even just the fact that she had broken up with him. But she had broken up with him because of her breathing, a problem that had been solved by the Elenil, or at least mostly solved. Despite all those things, she still wanted to be with him. He was the only one who had stood by her after she got sick. That Darius and this one were somehow the same man. The wasted land smelled of garbage and sulfur. They walked along a sickly stream of foul water. Refuse stood in random piles. When Darius took them too close to one pile, a mangy rat bared its teeth and hissed. Madeline found herself clutching Darius's arm with her free hand. Something about this place felt unsafe. She had felt this way before in the, quote, bad part of town, only here there was no town, just garbage and rats and the occasional stunted bush. Nothing healthy grew here. She shivered. After the temperate warmth of far-seeing, the cold of the wasted lands took her by surprise. Darius noticed and, without asking, unfastened his cloak and spread it over her shoulders. They trudged on through the dark. When she had warmed herself a little, she took his hand again. We're here, Darius said gently. He led her to a broken-down hut made of mud and discarded wood. It was shaped like a half-melted scoop of ice cream. The door stood crooked in the doorway. A window with no glass had been dug out of the space beside the door. Drifting from the hovel was a woman's voice singing, "Do not cry in the darkness," she sang, "but follow the small bright star." Madeline wanted to get closer to see the woman in the hut. Her voice, so clear and bright, was the first beautiful thing in this wasted place. Madeline moved quietly to the window. The woman's silver hair was pulled back from a lined, pleasant face. Black tattoos curled around her wiry arms, and as she sang, she dipped a dirty rag in a bowl of gray water. The only light came from a candle. At least Madeline thought it was a candle, about the size of a softball. A tiny wick stood out of it, and a pungent odor came from it. The woman dabbed water on a young girl's forehead. The girl, too, had black tattoos covering her arms as well as her neck and face. She wore a pale green nightshirt soaked in sweat and stuck to her stick-thin body. "Who are they?" Madeline whispered. Darius leaned against her back, whispering in her ear. "Look at her nightshirt," he said. "Look carefully." It was a thin material, maybe cotton, a V-neck. It was stained, as though someone had done their best to wash out mud or old dried blood, or both. The child broke into severe coughing so extreme Madeline's hand moved unconsciously to her own chest. The woman lifted the coughing girl's head and shoulders from the bed and held her. She didn't stop singing even when the child's coughing drowned her out completely. Madeline recognized that kind of coughing. A pang of sympathy pierced her. Madeline knew what it was like to lie in bed, perfectly aware there was nothing anyone could do for you. Confusion washed over her face. Are these skim? She asked. Yes, Darius said, but he didn't elaborate, didn't explain the answer to her question, which she was sure he must anticipate. Why aren't they? She stopped herself from asking the question that burned in her mind. It seemed disrespectful, but the fact remained they didn't have monstrous muscles or wide frog-like mouths. Their hair was not in greasy knots. They didn't have tusk-like teeth. The best word she could think of to describe them was graceful. The mother's hair shone with a lustrous light, and although the daughter was not well, a vibrant aura radiated from her. Why aren't they ugly? Darius asked. No hint of warmth in his voice. Madeline's ears went hot. It was her question, yes, but the way he said it only reinforced how ugly the question itself was. They don't look like any skim I've ever seen. What you've seen, Darius said, is their war skin. Before going to battle, they transform themselves to intimidate, to cause fear, to make it clear they shouldn't be messed with. You've never seen a skim before, not really. You've seen a people at war, not the people themselves. Living in this terrible, corrupted place, Madeline was amazed these people could show any sign of weakness ever. A moment of vulnerability, a minute of dropping their guard could be the difference between life and death. She didn't know them, not at all. Yet she had signed away a year of her life to fight them, to destroy them. I want to meet them, Madeline said. That's not a good idea, Darius said. Madeline turned on him, whispering fiercely, I thought your whole point was that I didn't know them. So let me learn. Darius deflated. At least, let me put my helmet on. Madeline crossed her arms. Why? So they know my position. So they know you're with me. She didn't understand what that meant. Fine. Once the helmet settled on his head, they stood together in front of the broken wooden door. Darius rapped on it and called out in his altered voice, Open! Who's there? A black skull and his honored guest. The door flew open. A man stood before them, thin but strong. He glanced at the skull, following the long lines of the horns with his eyes before bowing his head. Sir, he said, please sit and sup with us. The black skull bowed his head so he could enter the low-ceilinged hovel. He sat at a short table near a makeshift hearth. A small kettle hung over the fire. The girl did not turn to look at them. She stared, her eyes half-lidded at the dirt ceiling. The mother hurried to Madeline, guiding her to the table. She took Madeline's hand to seat her. Something startled the woman, and she gasped. What is it? Madeline asked. No, nothing, miss. She poured a small portion of gruel from the pot and set it in front of Madeline. A second portion went to the black skull, a third to her husband. Sit and eat with us, Madeline said. The woman blushed. There are but 3 bowls. Madeline said to Darius, Do you have a bowl or a cup on the owl? The black skull stared at her, unmoving. The woman said not to bother themselves, and her husband's face turned red too. Darius, his voice rough, said, This is all their food, Madeline. Do not embarrass them further. Now Madeline blushed. She held the bowl up to the woman. Please, I'm not hungry. The woman's dark eyes widened as if she had never heard such a thing. Darius put his hand on hers. Eat, Madeline. His voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone correcting a child. She had been rude somehow. Maybe in this culture you couldn't refuse food. She lifted the bowl to her lips. She had been among the Elenil long enough that this seemed a strange intimacy to eat with her hands uncovered. The simple gruel warmed her as she sipped from it. As she tipped the bowl away from her face, she noticed that the network of tattoos had moved onto her right hand now. It seemed to be moving faster, like ivy covering a tree. The girl coughed and called for her mother. The mother stayed near her guests, hovering beside them. Go to your child, the black skull said. We will call if we have needs. The woman bowed her head in a curt, thankful nod and rushed to her daughter's side, scooping her up in her arms. Madeline watched, her heart breaking for the poor girl. "Can we help?" Madeline asked. "Does she need medicine?" The skim man looked at the black skull, seeming embarrassed. When the black skull didn't speak, he turned again to Madeline and said, "Medicine will not help her." "What is her name?" Madeline asked. "She is called Yenel. Her mother is Farah. I am Inreef. I'm Madeline." "We know you, Madeline Oliver." Inreef looked down at his bowl. He had not taken even a sip. "You are our benefactor." "Your benefactor?" "Yes. We are honored to have you in our home." What was he talking about? She looked more carefully around their hut. There were a few clean rags, like the kind the Elenil used instead of toilet paper. Some clothes were hung near a small window. There was only the one narrow bed. Reef and Farah must sleep beside the fire, she decided. Yenel coughed harder, hacking. Her mother cried out and bit her own knuckle. Madeline couldn't take it any longer. She swept across to the girl and propped her up. "Sometimes sitting up helps with the breathing," she said. "It lets the lungs expand." Yenel said, "Thank you, miss." This close to her, Madeline could see the green nightshirt better on the small girl. In fact, it looked surprisingly like hospital scrubs. But how would they get those here in the Sunlit Lands? Or, she corrected herself, here in the Wasted Lands. Unless... No. The scrubs were too large for Yenel. No. Madeline saw the swirling black tattoos on Yenel's left arm. She saw the way they branched up her arm and crept across her clavicle. They came out again on her right arm, nearly to her wrist. Oh no. Madeline put her left arm alongside Yenel's. The patterns and whorls matched precisely. Every leaf, every branch. Yenel's breathing grew faster, shallow, and erratic. She coughed, trying to get a breath. A tendril of black tattoo crept up from her right hand, encircling her pinky. Madeline held up her own right hand. Her silver tattoo curled around her pinky, too. A rush of understanding coursed through her. "No," she whispered. The nightshirt. It was a pair of scrubs. Her scrubs. The ones she had thrown away when she made it to the Sunlit Lands. Somehow they had come here, to this family. The cough, that racking, awful cough, that was hers, too. It all fell into place with a terrible, grinding finality. She could breathe. She could run and jump and sing and shout and dance, and all it cost was a year of service to the Elenil. Or so she thought. She knew that the magic of the Sunlit Lands worked by taking something from one person and giving it to another. Jason received the skills and abilities of a warrior by taking them from someone else. He took the skills of an archer from a true archer, and during that time, the Elenil archer could no more fire an arrow than Jason had been able to from the top of Westwind, which meant her breath. Of course. She hadn't stopped to think about it, hadn't spent a single moment considering that maybe for her to breathe, someone else would not be able to. Her heart clenched in her chest. She felt dizzy and nauseated. She had to get out of this place. The walls were too close, the fire too warm, the smoke in the air too thick. How could they keep Yenel in here? Wasn't it obvious? It wasn't a good situation for her. A furious anger rose in her chest. Tears burst from her eyes, and she ran from the hut. She didn't know where she was going, didn't look at the ground. She just ran and felt the breath filling her lungs. A sob tore from her, and even that wasn't her own. It was borrowed from Yenel, stolen from a child. She fell on the ground, sobbing. What would she do? Deep, racking sobs shook her body. Madeline. A hand rested lightly on her shoulder. Madeline wiped at the tears on her face. It was Farah, the girl's mother. "It is for the best," she said. "You being our benefactor." Madeline stared at the pulsing silver tattoo on her arm. She wanted to rip it off. The bracelet if she could, her whole arm if she couldn't. "I'm going to destroy it," she said. Farah gasped. "No!" Madeline couldn't believe it. Why would Yenel's mother argue against getting her daughter back? "Your daughter can't breathe." Farah turned her face away as if ashamed. "The Elenil pay us every month so that Yenel will continue to share her breath with you. We agreed to the terms so we can feed her and ourselves." "How could you do that?" Madeline said. "They also send us the things you discard. We are..." Farah struggled for the right words. "Our neighbors are jealous." Madeline snatched a rock and began to beat it against her wrist where the bracelet lay beneath her skin. Farah covered Madeline's arm with her own and cried, "No, please no." "She'll die," Madeline said. Farah's face set into stone. "Without this, we will have no food. Yenel will die anyway. Then I. Then her father." "How can you do this?" Madeline asked. "She's your daughter. Don't you understand?" "It is you who do not understand. Yenel has made her choice. It is I who lie beside her in the night and wipe the sweat from her face. I who bore her, who rubs her back as she sends her breath to the sunlit corners where you live." A fierce anger came into her eyes. "It is I who holds her while you run, while you jump or dance, and Yenel's breath comes harder and harder. It is I who cradles her body and weeps while you sing with your friends." Madeline burst into tears again. I didn't know the cost." Farah studied her. "You did not know because you did not think to ask. You did not wonder what the cost of this magic would be to yourself or to others. But such is the way of those who have never paid for much." Farah stood and walked, her back straight, to the horrible, dilapidated hovel she called home, leaving Madeline to weep in the darkness. The end of chapter 31. Whew, that's a heavy one. Wow. Tomorrow we'll catch up with Jason, and don't worry, we'll come back to Yenel and her family in chapter 33, which will be on Thursday, our last chapter for the week. Okay, Lily Me says, "I was screaming at this point about how I'd also had all the pieces and never put it all together before this moment." This is actually one of the things about this chapter that I'm really proud of, is that when you get to this point, for most readers, almost everyone I've spoken to, it's a surprise, and yet everything's been there literally from the beginning to let you know that that's exactly what's happening. From the moment Jason first figures out how a toilet works, you should have been able to put the pieces together, and we don't, because that's not the way we think so often. And so Madeline represents us in many ways in this chapter, where she has this realization that she always had the pieces on some level. She must have known this, and she missed it. She missed it because she wasn't thinking about the skim. She wasn't aware of them. It's a painful realization for most of us. Okay. Couple reminders. This Friday, we'll have Lindsay Franklin with us, author of The Story Hunter, which is the third in the Weaver trilogy. You'll really enjoy Lindsay. She and I have been friends for some time. So somebody I already know that I know you're going to enjoy having her with us. As always, Tyndale.com is taking orders and sending books right now. And I don't know if it started yet, but there is a sale going to be going on with the Crescent Stone, which I know Dr. Awesome in particular likes taking advantage of. I will double check on that and let you know as the week progresses. But let's keep an eye on that. Also, of course, Natasha Sudek, her audiobooks are available at oasisaudio.com of the Crescent Stone, as well as of the sequel, The Heartwood Crown. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. Every time you like, every time you comment, it's another opportunity for one of your friends or family or someone in your network to find the content we're doing and come join us or to watch it later. And I'm so thankful for that. And when you subscribe, it's a little easier to find me, especially on days like yesterday when you don't know if I'm actually reading or not, which was terrible. I'm sorry. And Dr. Awesome says, OMG, sales, yes, exclamation point. The reason I say that, Dr. Awesome, at one point there was a sale of the Crescent Stone on the Tyndale website where if you, I can't remember, it was pretty cheap. I think it was it $7, something like that. And if you bought multiple, you get free shipping. And Dr. Awesome bought like 6 copies to give to her friends, which was really delightful and fun. So, all right, my friends. Tomorrow we pick up with Jason. We'll see what's happening with him in the wasteland. The wasteland, the Cockery Wastelands, a little more pleasant than the wasted lands of the Skim. I hope to see you tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So in the meantime, be safe, be well, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon.